Unable to sleep, Sabbath lay beside Rosanna, overcome by a stupendous, deforming emotion of which he had never before had first-hand knowledge. He was jealous now of the very men about whom, when Drenka was living, he could never hear enough. He thought about the men she had met in elevators, airports, parking lots, department stores, at hotel association conferences and food conventions. Men she had to have because their looks appealed to her. Men she slept with just once or had prolonged flings with. Men who 5 or 6 years after she'd last been to bed with them would unexpectedly phone the inn to extol her, to praise her, often without sparing the graphic obscenities to tell her how she was the least inhibited woman they had ever known. He remembered her explaining to him, because he had asked her to, what exactly made her choose one man in a room over another. And now he felt like the most foolishly innocent of husbands who uncovers the true history of an unfaithful wife. He felt as stupid as the holy simpleton Dr. Charles Bovary. The diabolical pleasure this had once afforded him. The happiness. When she was alive, nothing excited or entertained him more than hearing, detail by detail, the stories of her second life, her third life. He was the second. It's a very physical feeling that I get. It's the appearance. It's something chemical, I would almost like to say. There's an energy that I sense. It makes me very aroused, and I feel it then. I become sexualized. I feel it in my nipples. I feel it inside, in my body. If he is physical, if he is strong, the way he walks, the way he sits, the way he's himself. If he's juicy. Guys with small, dry lips, they turn me off. Or if they smell bookish, this dry pencil smell of men. I often look at their hands to see if they have strong, expressive hands. Then I imagine that they have a big dick. If there's any truth to this, I don't know, but I do it anyway as a little research. Some kind of confidence in the way they move. It isn't that they have to look elegant. It's rather an animalistic appearance under the elegance. So it's a very intuitive thing, and I know it right away. They've always known it. And so I say, okay, I go and fuck him. Well, I have to open the channels for him. So I look at him and I flirt with him. I just start laughing or show my legs and sort of show him that it's all right. Sometimes I make a real bold gesture. I wouldn't mind having an affair with you. Yeah, she said, laughing at the extent of her own impulsiveness. I could say something like that. That guy I had in Aspen, I felt his interest. But he was in his 50s, and there I always questioned how hard can they get. With a younger guy, it's an easy thing. But with an older one, you don't know. But I felt this kind of vibration, and I was really turned on. And you move your arm closer, or he moves his arm closer, and you're in this aura of sexual feeling together, and everybody else in the room is excluded. I think with that man, I actually openly stated that it was okay, that I was interested. The boldness with which he went after them, the ardor and the skill with which he aroused them, the delight she found in watching them jerk off, and the pleasure she then took in telling me all she'd learned about lust and what it is for men, and the torment all this was to him now. He'd not had the faintest idea that he could feel such distress. What I enjoyed to see was how they were by themselves, that I could be the observer there, and to see how they played with their dick, and how it was formed, the shape of it, and when it became hard, and also the way they held their hand. It turned me on. Everybody jerks their dick differently, and when they abandon themselves to it, when they allow themselves to abandon themselves, this is very exciting. And to see them come that way. This Lewis guy, he was in his 60s, and he'd never jerked off, he said, in front of a woman. And he was sort of holding his hand this way, She turned her wrist so that the little finger was at the top of her fist and the second knuckle of her thumb at the bottom. Well, to see that particularity of it, and as I say, to see when they get so hot they can't stop themselves in spite of being shy, that is very exciting. That's what I like best, watching them lose control. The shy ones she would softly suck for a few minutes and then place their hands for them on themselves and help them along until they were safely into it and on their own. Then, beginning lightly to finger herself, she would lean back and look on. When she next saw Sabbath, she would demonstrate on him the peculiar particularity of each man's technique. He was tremendously stirred by this. And now it made him jealous, maddeningly jealous. Now that she was dead, he wanted to shake her and shout at her and tell her to stop. Only me. Fuck your husband when you have to, but otherwise no one but me. In fact, he didn't want her to fuck Mattia either. Him least of all. On the rare occasions when she used to report those details to Sabbath, too, they had hardly engrossed him, provoked not the slightest erotic interest. Yet now, there was barely a night when he was free of the mortifying memory of Drinka allowing her husband to take her like a wife. Checking Mattia in bed, I saw his erection. I was certain he would not act on it without my taking first initiative, so quickly I undressed. I could not get aroused, even if I had strong, tender feelings for my husband. Seeing his hard cock, smaller than yours, Mickey, and with a foreskin which, when the skin is pulled down, is much redder than yours. Thinking about the way we had just fucked. Well, longing for your big, hard dick. It was almost painful. How could I abandon myself to this man who loves me? When he penetrated me, lying on top of me, Mattia was moaning louder than I ever recollect. It was almost as if he was crying. Since it never takes him long to come, the whole thing was over soon. After sleeping 1 or 2 hours, I woke up, sick to my stomach. I had to throw up and take some Mylanta. How dare he? What chutzpah! Sabbath wanted to murder Mattia. And why didn't I? Why didn't we, uncircumcised dog, smite him thus? One brilliantly sunny day back in February, Sabbath had come upon Drenka's widowed husband up at the Stop and Shop in Cumberland. For the first time that winter it hadn't snowed in 4 consecutive days, and so, after donning an old knit seaman's cap in which to swab down the bathroom and kitchen floors and give the house a vacuuming, Sabbath had driven up to Cumberland, blinded much of the way by the light off the gargantuan drifts banked at the side of the road, to do the grocery shopping, one of his weekly household chores. And there was Mattia, almost unrecognizable since he'd seen him silent and stone-faced at the funeral. His black hair had gone white, completely white in just the 3 months. He looked so weak, so slight, his face emaciated, and all of this in just 3 months. He could have passed for a senior citizen, older even than Sabbath, and he was only in his mid-50s. The inn was closed every year from New Year's Day to April 1st, and so Mattia was out shopping for the few things he needed, living alone in the Balich's big new house up from the lake and the inn. Balich was directly behind him in the checkout line, and, though he nodded when Sabbath looked his way, registered no recognition. "Mr. Balich, my name is Mickey Sabbath." "Yes, how do you do?" "Does Mickey Sabbath mean anything to you?" "Yes," said Balich kindly after feigning a moment's thought. "I believe you have been a patron of mine. I recognize you from the inn." "No," said Sabbath. "I live in Madamascar Falls, but we don't eat out much." "I see," replied Balich, and after smiling for a few seconds more, somberly returned to his thoughts. "I'll tell you how we know each other," said Sabbath. "Yes?" "My wife was your son's art teacher at the high school, Rosanna Sabbath. She and your Matthew became great friends." "Ah." Again he smiled courteously. Sabbath had never realized before how much there was in Drenka's husband of the subdued and courtly European gentleman. Maybe it was the white hair, the grief, the accent. but he had about him the magisterial air of a senior diplomat from a small country. No, Sabbath hadn't known this about him. The dignified composure came as a surprise. But then, the other guy is often just a blur. Even if he's your best friend or the fellow across the street who more than once has jump-started your car, he becomes a blur. He becomes the husband, and sympathetic imagination dwindles away, right along with conscience. The only time Sabbath ever before had occasion to observe Matti in public was the April preceding the Kathy Goolsby scandal, when he went over to the inn on the third Tuesday of the month with the 30 or so Rotarians who gathered there for their luncheon meeting the third Tuesday of every month, as a guest of Gus Kroll, the service station owner, who never failed to pass on to Sabbath the jokes he heard from the truckers who stopped to gas up and use the facilities. Gus had a great audience in Sabbath because even when the jokes were not uniformly of the first rank, the fact that Gus rarely bothered to wear his dentures while he was telling them furnished Sabbath with sufficient delight. Gus's impassioned commitment to repeating the jokes had long ago led the puppeteer to understand that they were what gave unity to Gus's vision of life, that they alone answered the need of his spiritual being for a clarifying narrative with which to face day after day at the pump. With every joke that poured forth from Gus's toothless mouth, Sabbath was reassured that not even a simple guy like Gus was free of the human need to find a strand of significance that will hold together everything that isn't on TV. Sabbath had asked Gus if he would be kind enough to invite him to the meeting to hear Mattia Balic address the Rotary Club on the topic of innkeeping today. By then, Sabbath already knew that Mattia had been agonizingly preparing the speech for weeks. Sabbath had even read the speech, or the first short version of it, when Drenka had brought it to him to look at. She had typed the 6 pages for her husband, done her best to catch the errors, but she wanted Sabbath to double-check the English, and amiably he agreed to help. "It's fascinating," he said after twice reading it through. "It is? It moves along the track like a goddamn train. Really, it's wonderful. 2 problems, however. It's too short. He's not thorough enough. It's got to be 3 times as long. And this expression, this idiom here, is wrong. It isn't nuts and bolts. You don't say in English, if you watch the nuts and bolts." "No? Who told him it was nuts and bolts, Drenka?" "Stupid Drenka did," she replied. "Nuts and bulbs," said Sabbath. "Nuts and bulbs," she repeated and wrote on the back of the last page. "And write down there that he stops too soon," said Sabbath. 3 times as long, at least. They'll listen, he told her. This is stuff nobody knows. Gus came by Brick Furnace Road to pick up Sabbath in the tow truck, and no sooner were they off than Gus started in entertaining him with what he knew to be taboo for what Gus called the churchy guys in town.
"Can you take a joke that's not too appreciative of women?" Gus asked him.
"The only kind I can take."
"Well, this truck driver, whenever he goes away, his wife, she gets cold and lonely. So when he comes back from a trip, he brings her a skunk, a big, furry, live skunk. And he tells her that next time he goes away, she should take it to bed with her, and when she goes to sleep, she should put it between her legs. So she says to him, 'What about the smell?' And he says, 'He'll get used to it. I did.' 'Well, if you like that one,' said Gus when he heard Sabbath's laughter, 'I got another one along the same lines.' And so in no time they arrived for the meeting. The Rotarians were already milling around in the rustic bar room with the exposed beams across the low ceiling and the cheerful white tile hearth, all of them packed closely together in the one smallish room, perhaps because of the cozy fire burning there on a cold, gusty spring day, or perhaps because of the platters on the bar of cevapcici, a Yugoslav national specialty that was also a specialty of the inn. "I have to feed you a cevapcici," Drenka had told Sabbath when they were still newly lovers playing post-coital pranks in bed. "Feed me anything you want." 3 types of meat," she told him. "One is beef, one is pork, then is lamb. All is ground. Then some onions are added in it and some pepper. It is like a meatball, but a different shape, very small. It is obligatory to eat cevapcici with onion. An onion cut into small pieces. You can have little peppers too, red, very hot."
It doesn't sound bad at all, said Sabbath, full of pleasure with her, smiling away. Yes, I am going to feed you cevapcici, she said adoringly, and I, in turn, will fuck your brains out. Oh, my American boyfriend, that means you will fuck me seriously? Quite seriously. It means hard? Very hard. And it means what else? I have learned to do it in Croatian, to say all the words and not be shy, but never anyone has taught me to do it in America. Tell me. Teach me. Teach me what all the things mean in American. It means every which way. And then, as conscientiously as she had explained to him how to make cevapcici, he went ahead to teach her what every which way meant. Or perhaps they were in the bar room because, tending bar, Drenka was wearing a black crepe blouse that buttoned up to a V-neck that did her plumpness full justice whenever she ducked down to fill a glass with ice. Sabbath stood back by the door for close to a half an hour, watching her, flirting with the chiropractor, a strong young fellow with a loud bark of a laugh, who didn't do at all well hiding his sexual orientation, and then with the former state representative who was owner of the 3 branches of the Cumberland Bank Corps, and finally even with Gus, who, fully fitted out now in his uppers and lowers, and for the occasion wearing a string tie at the neck of his coveralls, was just the man he'd like to see her fuck, to be assured that she was as wonderful as he thought she was. Oh, she was jolly, all right. The only woman amid all these men, the blissful stimulus serving their blissful stimulant, plainly ecstatic just to be living on earth. When Sabbath pushed through the hubbub up to the bar and asked for a beer, she registered surprise at his presence by instantly turning white. What kind do you like, Mr. Sabbath? Do you have pussy from Yugoslavia? From the tap or a bottle? Which do you recommend? More foam from the tap, she said, smiling at him now that she had recovered her wits, with a smile that he would have taken for a startlingly open proclamation of their secret had he not seen the same smile bestowed earlier on Gus. Draw me one, will you? He said with a wink. I like the foam. When the meal ended, big pork chops with apple rings in a calvados sauce, chocolate ice cream sundaes, cigars, and for those who wanted an after-luncheon drink, Prosek, a Swedish white Dalmatian wine that Drenka, as their charming old-world hostess, ordinarily served to paying guests compliments of the house, Mattia was introduced by the Rotary president as Matt Ballack. The innkeeper was wearing a red cashmere turtleneck, a blazer with gold buttons, new cavalry twill trousers, and unworn, unmarked bally boots polished to a high gloss. Snappily decked out like that, he looked more impressively brawny even than when he was working in a T-shirt and worn jeans. The allure of a heavily muscled male figure conventionally clothed for social intercourse. An animalistic appearance under the elegance. Sabbath had had it himself once, or so Nicky used to tell him when she urged him to buy a dark blue suit with a vest so the world could appreciate how gorgeous he was. Gorgeous Sabbath. Those were the 50s. Mattia's passion was to rebuild the stone walls falling to pieces in the 50 acres of fields adjacent to the house and the inn. On the island of Brach, where he had relatives and where he had been working as a waiter when he met Drenka, there was a tradition of masonry, and while he was on the island he would spend his days off helping a cousin who was building himself a house of stone. And, of course, Mattia had never forgotten the grandfather cutting stone in the quarries, an aging man imprisoned on Goli Otok as an enemy of the regime, which made lugging the big stones and setting them in place something almost of a commemorative rite for Mattia. That was how he spent his breaks from the kitchen. Outside, half an hour, moving rocks, and he was ready for another 3, 4, 5 hours on his feet in a temperature of 100 degrees. He spent much of each winter moving those rocks. His only friends, reported Drenka sadly, are the walls and me. Some people, Mattia began, think this business is fun. It is not fun. It is a business. Read the industry magazines. People say, I want to get away from corporate life. An inn. This is my dream. but I am dedicated to this inn as though I am going every day to a corporate structure." The pace at which Mattia read made it possible for his audience to follow without trouble despite his heavy accent. At the end of every sentence, he allowed them a long moment to consider all the implications of what he had just said. Sabbath enjoyed the pauses no less than the monotony of the uninflected sentences they separated. Sentences that caused him to remember for the first time in many years a lonely archipelago of uninhabitable islands that the merchant ships passed, leaving Vera Cruz for the south. Sabbath enjoyed the pauses because he was responsible for them. He had told Drenka to instruct Mattia to be sure to take his time. Amateur speakers always rush. Don't rush, he told her to tell him. There's a lot for an audience to digest. The slower, the better. "For instance, we have been audited twice," Mattia told them. From the large bay window at the head of the rectangular dining room, Sabbath and the guests on his side of the table could see clear down to where the wind was whipping up Lake Madamascar. Their eyes could have traveled from one end to the other of that long washboard of a lake before Mattia appeared to conclude that the impact of the two audits had been fully absorbed. "There is nothing wrong," he then continued. "My wife keeps our books straight and we go to an accountant for advices. So we run it as a business and it is our livelihood. If you watch the nuts and bulbs, the business works for you. If you don't watch and go out and talk with the guests all the time, you are losing money. Years ago, we did not serve all the time through the afternoon on Saturday. We still don't. But we make food available to the people. The smart thing is to give people what they want rather than say, no, I have this rule, I have that rule. I am pretty strict about the way I think about things. But the public teaches me not to be so strict. We have 50 in staff, including part-time. Serving staff is 35, waitresses, bus staff, dining room supervisors. We have 12 rooms plus the annex. We can take 28 people and are full most weekends, though not during the week. In the restaurant, we can seat 130 inside and 100 on the terrace. But we never seat 230 people altogether. The cooking line can't handle it. What we looked for is turnover. The other serious problem comes with the staff. This went on for an hour. There was a fire blazing in the main dining room, as well as the smaller one burning in the bar. And because of the cold winds blowing outside, the windows were all shut tight. The fireplace was only some 6 feet behind Mattia, but the heat of it did not seem to affect him the way it did the Scotch drinkers at the table. They were the first to pass out. The beer drinkers were able to hold on longer. "We are not absentee owners. I am the main fellow. If everybody else leaves, I am still standing here. My wife can do everything except 2 cooking line jobs. She can't work on the broiler because she has no idea how to cook. And she can't do the sauté, where you are basically frying in pans. But all the other jobs she can do. The bartender, the dishwasher, serving, bookkeeping, working the floor." Gus, on the wagon these days, drank tab, but Sabbath saw that Gus was out, just from the tab. And now the beer drinkers were losing their grip and beginning to look enfeebled. The owner of the bank, the chiropractor, the big mustached guy who ran the gardening center. Drenka was listening from the bar. When the puppeteer turned in his seat to smile at her, he saw that, leaning over the bar on her elbows, her face balanced on her fists, she was crying, and this with half the Rotarians still clinging to consciousness. "It is not always nice for us that our staff doesn't like us. I think some of our staff likes us a lot. Some of them don't care for us at all. In some places, the bar is open to the staff after hours. We don't have that kind of thing here. Those are the places that go bankrupt and where the staff is in terrible auto accidents on the way home. Not here. Here it is not party time with the owners. Here it is not fun. My wife and I are not fun at all. We are work. We are a business. All Yugoslavs, when they go abroad, they are very hard-working. Something in our history pushes them for survival. Thank you. There were no questions, but then there were barely a handful at the long table still capable of asking one. The Rotary president said, "Wow, thanks, Matt. Thanks a million. That took us through the process pretty thoroughly." Some people began to wake up to go back to work. On Friday of that same week, Drenka went to Boston and fucked her dermatologist, the credit card magnate, the university dean, and then back at home just before midnight, making a total of 4 for the day. She was fucked holding her breath for the few minutes it lasted by the orator she was married to. Now, down in the abandoned center of Cumberland, where the movie theater was long gone and the stores mostly vacant, there was an impoverished wreck of a grocery where Sabbath liked to get a container of coffee and drink it standing up right there after he'd done the weekly shopping. The place, Flo and Bert's, was dark, with dirty, worn wooden floors, undusted shelves largely empty of goods, and the most wretched potatoes and bananas Sabbath had ever seen for sale anywhere. But Flo and Bert's, grisly mortuary though it was, smelled exactly like the old grocery in the basement of the Lorraine Arms, a block away from their house, where Sabbath used to go first thing every morning to get 2 fresh rolls for his mother so she could make Morty sandwiches to take to his high school for lunch. Cream cheese and olive, peanut butter and jelly, but mainly canned tuna. The sandwiches double-wrapped with wax paper and stuffed in the paper bag from the Lorraine Arms. Each week, after Stop and Shop, Sabbath walked round Flo's and Bert's with his coffee container in his hand, trying to figure out what the ingredients were that went into that smell, which is also like something he smelled up at the grotto in late autumn, after the fallen leaves and the dying underbrush had been dampened down by the rains and begun to rot. Maybe it was that. Damp rot. He loved it. The coffee he had to drink there was undrinkable, but he could never resist the pleasure of that smell. Sabbath stationed himself outside the door to Stop and Shop, and when Balich emerged carrying a plastic bag in either hand, he said, "Mr. Balich, how about a hot cup of coffee?" "Thank you, sir. No." "Come on," said Sabbath good-naturedly. "Why not? It's 10 degrees out here." Should he convert that into Celsius for him, as he would for Drenka when she telephoned before going up to the grotto to ask what it really was outside? "There's a place down the hill. Follow me. The Chevy. A cup of coffee to warm you up." Leading Balich's car between the 1-story-high snowbanks and across the railroad tracks agleam from the frost, Sabbath had to admit that he had no idea what he was planning to do. All he could think of was this guy daring to lie across his Drenka, moaning with pleasure as though he were crying, penetrating her with a dog-red cock that afterwards made her throw up. Yes, it was time that he and Balich met. To go through life without meeting him face to face would be making life too easy for himself. He would long ago have died of boredom without his extensive difficulties. The putrid coffee was poured from the silex by a sullen, stupid girl in her late teens who had been a sullen, stupid girl in her late teens ever since Sabbath had begun dropping in to smell Flo and Bert some 15 years back. Maybe they were all from the same family, daughters of Flo and Bert who successively grew into the job. Or maybe, more likely, there was an inexhaustible supply of these girls turned out by the Cumberland school system. On the prowl, insinuating, unselective Sabbath had never been able to get anything more than a grunt out of any of them. Involuntarily, Balich made a face when he tasted the coffee, which turned out to be about as cold as the day, but politely said, "Oh, no, very good, but 1 is enough," when Sabbath asked if he'd like a second cup. "It's not been easy for you without your wife," Sabbath said. "You look very thin." "These have been dark days," Balich replied. "Still?" He nodded sadly. "It's awful still. I'm right at the bottom. At 31 years, I'm in my 3rd month of a new regime. Somehow, in some ways, every day it gets worse. That it does. And your son is in a bit of a state of shock, too. He misses her terribly. But he's young, he's strong. Sometimes his wife tells me in the dark hours of the night. But he seems to be coping. That's good, Sabbath said. That is about the strongest bond in the world, the mother and the little boy. Couldn't be anything stronger. Yes, said Balach, his soft gray eyes growing teary from talking to somebody so understanding. Yes, and when I looked at her, dead, with my son at the hospital in the middle of the night, she was lying there with all the tubes, and when I looked at her, and I saw that it was broken, that bond with our son, I could not believe that this strongest thing in the world that you say was no longer in existence. There she was, all her beauty lying there, and that strongest thing wasn't any more. She was gone, so I kissed her goodbye. My son did, and I did. And they took all the tubes out. And this piece of human sunlight was there, but dead. How old was she? 52. It's the most cruel thing that could have happened. Of all the people in the world who would have died in their 50s like that, said Sabbath, I would never have imagined your wife on the list. A few times I ever saw her in town. As you say, she lit up everything. And your son works with you at the inn? Innkeeping is not on my mind at all. Whether that comes back ever, I don't know. I do have a staff of good workers, but innkeeping is not on my mind. Our whole marriage was tied up with the inn. I'm thinking of leasing the business. If some Japanese corporation want to come along and buy it, every time I go into her office to try and deal with her things, it's awful. It makes me sick. I don't want to be there, and I go. Sabbath had not been mistaken, he thought, to have never written Drenka a single letter, or to have insisted that it should be he, and not she, who filed away for safekeeping the Polaroids he'd taken of her at the Bo Peep. The letters, Balach said, looking imploringly towards Sabbath, as though to make an appeal. 256 letters. Of consolation, asked Sabbath, who, of course, had not himself received a single one. When Nicky disappeared, however, he'd got mail about her, care of the theater, though by now he'd forgotten how much, maybe 50 letters in all. At the time he'd been stupefied enough to keep careful count, though. Of sympathy, yes, 256. I shouldn't have been amazed at how she lit up everyone's life. I'm getting letters still, and from people I can't even remember. Some came to the inn when we first opened at the other end of the lake. Letters from all kinds of people about her and about how she affected their life. And I believe them are true. I got a long 2-page letter, a handwritten letter from the ex-mayor of Worcester. Really? He remembers our barbecues for the guests and how she made everyone happy. How she came into the dining room at breakfast and talked to everybody. She just touched everybody. See, I am strict. I have a rule for everything. But she knew how to treat the guests. Everything was always possible for the guests. For her to be pleasant, it was never an effort. One owner is strict, the other is flexible and pleasant. We were a perfect pair to make us successful in. It's amazing what she did. 1,000 different things. She did it all gracefully and always with great pleasure. I can't stop dwelling on it. There is nothing that can take away even a little of this misery. It's impossible to believe. 1 minute here, next minute not. The ex-mayor of Worcester. Well, she had secrets from both of us, Matya. And what is your son's occupation? A state trooper. Married? His wife is pregnant. The baby will be Drenka if it's a girl. Drenka? My wife's name, said Balach. Drenka, he muttered. There will never be another Drenka. You see him much, your son? Yes, he lied, unless since Drenka's death there had been a rapprochement. Balich suddenly had no more to say. Sabbath used the break to smell the market's smell. Either Balich did not want to talk about his grief over Drenka with a stranger any longer, or he did not want to talk about his grief over his state trooper son, who thought innkeeping was a stupid business. How come your son isn't a partner in the inn? Why doesn't he take over with you now that your wife is gone? I see, said Balich, after carefully setting his half-cup on the counter beside the register, that you have arthritic fingers. This is a painful disorder. My brother has arthritic fingers. Really? Sylvia's father? Asked Sabbath. Openly surprised, Balich said, You know my little niece? My wife met her. My wife told me about her. She said she was a very, very pretty and charming child. Sylvia loved her aunt very much. She worshipped her aunt. Sylvia became our daughter, too. In his quiet voice there was little intonation now other than the unmistakable intonation of sorrow. Is Sylvia at the inn in the summertime? My wife said she was working there to learn English. Sylvia comes every summer while she is in university. What are you doing, training her to take over your wife's job? No, said Balich, and Sabbath was surprised by how disappointed he was to hear this. She will be a computer programmer. That's too bad, said Sabbath. That's what she wants to be, said Balich flatly. But if she could help you run the inn, if she could light up the place the way your wife did. Balich reached into his pocket for money. Sabbath said, Please, but Balich was not listening any longer. Doesn't like me, Sabbath thought. Didn't take to me. Must have said the wrong thing. My coffee? Balich asked the sullen girl at the register. She answered with as few sounded consonants as possible, other things on her mind. You what? Balich asked her. Sabbath translated. $50. Balich paid, and, nodding formally at Sabbath, concluded his initial encounter with someone he clearly did not wish to meet ever again. It was Sylvia that had done it, Sabbath's modifying very with very. But that was as close as the puppeteer had come to telling Balich in their first 5 minutes together that the woman who had vomited after having to fuck him had every good reason to vomit because all the while she had been as good as someone else's wife. Of course he understood Balich's feelings. For him, too, the shock of her death was only getting worse by the day, but that didn't mean that Sabbath could forgive him. 5 months after her death, a damp, warm April night with a full moon canonizing itself above the tree line, effortlessly floating, luminously blessed toward the throne of God, Sabbath stretched out on the ground that covered her coffin and said, You filthy, wonderful drinker cunt, marry me. Marry me. With his white beard down in the dirt, the plot was still grassless and without a stone. He envisioned his Drenka. It was bright inside the box, and she looked just like herself before the cancer stripped her of all that appealing roundness, ripe, full, ready for contact. Tonight she was wearing Sylvia's dirndl, and she was laughing at him. So now you want me all to yourself. Now, she said, when you don't have to have only me, and live only with me, and be bored only by me. Now I am good enough to be your wife. Marry me. Smiling invitingly, she replied, First, you'll have to die, and raised Sylvia's dress to reveal that she was without underpants, dark stockings and a garter belt, but no underpants. Even dead, Drenka gave him a hard-on. Alive or dead, Drenka made him 20 again. Even with the temperatures below zero, he would grow hard whenever from her coffin she enticed him like this. He had learned to stand with his back to the north so the icy wind did not blow directly on his dick, but he still had to remove one of the gloves to jerk off successfully, and sometimes the gloveless hand would get so cold that he would have to put that glove back on and switch to the other hand. He came on her grave many nights. The old cemetery was 6 miles out of town on a little-used road that curved up into the woods and then zigzagged down the western side of the mountain, where it emptied into a superannuated truck route to Albany. The cemetery was set into an open hillside that rolled gently up to an ancient stand of hemlock and white pine. It was beautiful, still, aesthetically charming, melancholy perhaps, but not a cemetery that made you downhearted to enter. It was so charming that it sometimes looked as though it had nothing to do with death. It was old, very old, though there were some even older in the nearby hills, their eroded tombstones fallen aslant, dating back to the earliest years of colonial America. The first burial here, a certain John Driscoll, had been in 1745. The last burial had been of Drinka on the last day of November 1993. Because of the 17 snowstorms that winter, it was often impossible for him to make his way up to the cemetery, even on nights when Rosanna had hurried off to an AA meeting in her four-wheel drive and he was all alone. But when the roads were plowed, the weather was good, the sun down, and Rosanna gone, he drove his Chevy up to the top of Battle Mountain and parked at the cleared entrance to a hiking path about a quarter-mile east of the cemetery and made his way along the highway to the graveyard and then, using a flashlight as sparingly as he could, across the treacherous glaze of the drifted snow to her grave. He never drove out during the day, however much he needed to, for fear of running into one of her Matthews, or, for that matter, anyone who would take to wondering why, at the coldest spot in the state's icebox county, in the midst of the worst winter in local history, the disgraced puppeteer was paying his respects to the remains of the innkeeper's peppy wife. At night, he could do what he wished to do, unseen by anyone but his mother's ghost. "What do you want? If you want to say something," but his mother never did communicate with him, and just because she didn't, he came dangerously close to believing that she was not a hallucination. If he was hallucinating, then easily enough he could hallucinate speech for her, enlarge her reality with a voice of the kind with which he used to enliven his puppets. These visitations had been going on too regularly to be a mental aberration. Unless he was mentally aberrant and the unreality was going to worsen as life became even more unendurable. Without Drinka, it was unendurable. He didn't have a life, except at the cemetery. The first April after her death, on this early spring night, Sabbath lay spread-eagled atop her grave, reminiscing with her about Krista. "Never forget you coming," he whispered into the dirt. "Never forget you begging her more, more." Invoking Krista did not exacerbate his jealousy, remembering Drinka lying back in his arms while Krista maintained the steady pressure of the point of her tongue on Drinka's clitoris for close to an hour. He timed them, only intensified the loss. Even though, shortly after the three had first got together, Krista began taking Drinka to a bar in Spotsfield to dance. She went so far as to make Drinka the gift of a gold chain that she'd lifted from her former employer's jewelry drawer on the morning she decided she'd had enough of looking after a kid so hyperactive that he was about to be enrolled in a special school for the gifted. She told Drinka that the value of everything she'd walked off with, including a pair of diamond stud earrings and a slithery little bracelet of diamonds, didn't come to half of what she was entitled to for having been stuck sight unseen with that kid. Krista lived in an attic room on Town Street, overlooking the green, just above the gourmet food shop where she worked. Her rent was free, lunches were free, and in addition she was paid $25 a week. For 2 months, on Wednesday nights, Drinka and Sabbath would go in separate cars to lie with Krista in the attic. Nothing was open on Town Street after dark, and they could get up unobserved to Krista's by an outside back staircase. 3 times Drinka had been by herself to see Krista there, but fearful that Sabbath would be angry with her if he knew, She did not tell him until a year after Krista had turned against the two of them and moved out to the countryside, into the rented farmhouse of a history instructor on the Athena faculty, a woman of 30 with whom Krista had begun a love affair even before she had undertaken her little caprice with the elderly. Abruptly, she stopped answering Sabbath's phone calls, and when he ran into her one day while he pretended to be studying the window display of the gourmet shop, a display which hadn't changed since Tip Top Grocery Company had evolved in the late 60s into Tip Top Gourmet Company to accommodate the ardor of the times, she said to him angrily, her mouth so minute it looked like something omitted from her face, "I don't want to talk to you any more." "Why? What happened?" "You two exploited me." "I don't think that's true, Krista. To exploit someone means to use someone selfishly for one's own ends or to utilize them for profit. I don't think either of us exploited you any more than you exploited either of us. You're an old man. I am 20 years old. I do not want to talk to you." "Won't you at least talk to Drenka?" "Leave me alone. You're nothing but a fat old man." "So was Falstaff, kiddo. So was that huge hill-of-flesh Sir John Paunch, sweet creator of bombast, that villainous, abominable misleader of youth, Falstaff, that old white-bearded Satan." But she was by this time already into the shop, leaving Sabbath to sadly contemplate, along with the crystaless future, 2 jars of Miki Chinese duck sauce, 2 jars of Crino's grape leaves in brine, 2 cans of La Victoria refried beans, and 2 cans of Baxter's cream of smoked trout soup, all of them encircling a bottle fancily wrapped in a sun-faded whitish paper shroud and positioned on a pedestal at the center of the window as if it were the answer to all our cravings, a bottle of Lee & Perrin's Worcestershire sauce. Yes, a relic, much like Sabbath himself, of what was considered, oh, so spicy in a bygone era, less, in a bygone era more, in a bygone era when, in a bygone era whose, idiot, the mistake was never to have given her money. The mistake was to have given Drenka the money instead. All he'd slipped Krista, and this only to get a foot in the door the first time, was $35 for a quilt she'd made. He should have been slipping her that much per week. To have imagined that Krista was in it for the fun of making Drenka crazy, that Drenka's coming was for her remuneration enough. Idiot! Idiot! Sabbath and Krista had met one night in 1989 when he'd given her a lift home. He saw her out on the shoulder of 144 wearing a tuxedo, and he circled back. If she had a knife, she had a knife. Did it matter living a few years more or less? It was impossible to leave standing all alone on the side of the road with her thumb lifted a young blonde girl in a tuxedo, who looked like a young blonde boy in a tuxedo. She explained her outfit by saying she had been to a dance down in Athena at the college where you had to come wearing something crazy. She was petite but hardly childlike, more a miniaturized woman, with a very crisp, self-confident air about her and a tightly held little mouth. The German accent was gentle but inflammatory. For Sabbath, any attractive woman's accent was inflammatory. The haircut was short as a Marine recruit's, and the tuxedo suggested that she was not without the inclination to play a provocative role in life. Otherwise, the kid was all business, no sentiment, no longings, no illusions, no follies, and, he'd bet his life on it, he had, no taboos to speak of. Sabbath liked the cruel toughness, the shrewdness of the calculating, mistrustful little German mouth, and saw the possibilities right off, remote, but there. Admiringly, he thought, unbesmirched by selflessness, a budding beast of prey. As he drove along, he had been listening to a tape of Benny Goodman's Live at Carnegie Hall. He and Drenka had just parted for the night at the Bo Peep, some 20 miles south on 144. "Are they black?" the German girl asked. "No, a few are black, but mainly, miss, they are white. white jazz musicians, Carnegie Hall in New York, the night of January 16, 1938. You were there? She asked. Yes, it took my children, my little children. So they would be present at a musical milestone. Wanted them beside me the night that America changed forever. Together, they listened to Honeysuckle Rose, Goodman's Boys jamming with a half a dozen members of the Basie band. This is jumpin', Sabbath told her. This is what's called a foot mover. Keeps your feet moving. Hear that guitar back there? Notice how that rhythm section is driving them on? Basie, very lean piano playing. Hear that guitar there? Carrying this thing. That's black music. You're hearing black music now. Now you're going to hear a riff. That's James. Underneath all this is that steady rhythm section carrying this whole thing. Freddie Green on guitar. James always had the feeling he's tearing that instrument apart. You can hear it tear. This figure they're just dreaming up. Watch them build it now. They're working their way into the ride out. Here it comes. They're all tuned into each other. They're off. They're off. Well, what do you make of that? Sabbath asked her. It's like the music in cartoons. You know, the cartoons for the kids on TV? Yes, said Sabbath. And it was thought to be hot stuff at the time. The innocent old ways of life, everywhere you look, except in our sleepy village here, he said, stroking his beard. The world's at war against them. And you, what brings you to Madamascar Falls? Asked Father Time jovially. There is no other way to play it. She told him about the tedium of her au pair job in New York, how by the second year she couldn't stand the child anymore, so she had just picked up one day and run off. She had found Madamascar Falls by closing her eyes and putting her finger down on a map of the Northeast. Madamascar Falls wasn't even on the map, but she had got a ride as far as the traffic light by the green, stopped for a coffee at the gourmet shop, and when she asked if there was any work around, a job materialized right there. For 5 months now, the gentleman's sleepy village had been her home. You were escaping your job in New York with the kid. I was going crazy. What else are you escaping? He asked, but lightly, probing, not at all. Me, I'm not escaping anything, just to get a sense of life. In Germany, there is no future for me. I know everything and how it works. Here, a lot of things happen to me that would never have happened to me back home. You don't get lonely? Asked the nice, concerned man. Sure, I get lonely. It's hard to make friendships with Americans. Is it? In New York it is, sure. They want to use you in any possible way. That's the first idea that comes to their mind. I'm surprised to hear this. People in New York are worse than people in Germany? History would seem to tell a different story. No, definitely, and cynical. In New York, they keep their true motives to themselves and announce to you other motives. Young people? No, mostly older than me, in their 20s. Did you get hurt? Yeah. But then they're very friendly. Hi, how are you doing? It's very lovely to see you. She enjoyed her imitation of an American dope, and he laughed appreciatively too. And you don't even know this person. Germany is very different, she told him. Here there's all this friendliness, and it's fake. Hey, hi, how are you? You have to. The American way. I was very naive when I came here. I was 18. I run into lots of people, strangers, I don't know. I go out for coffee. You have to be naive when you come as a stranger. Of course, you learn, all right. The trio, Benny, Krupa, Teddy Wilson's piano, body and soul. Very dreamy, very danceable, just lovely, right down to the Krupa three-thump finale. Though Morty thought that Krupa's pyrotechnics were always ruining the damn thing. Just let it swing, Morty would say. Krupa is the worst thing that ever happened to Goodman. Too obtrusive. And Mickey would repeat this as his own opinion at school. Morty would say, Benny's never shy about taking up half the piece. And Mickey would repeat that. A beautiful clarinet player. Nobody near him. And that, too, he repeated. He wondered if it might not soften up this German girl, the late-night languor-inducing beat and that tactful, torchy something in Goodman's playing. And so, for 3 minutes, he said nothing to her, and to the seductive coherence of body and soul, the two of them drove through the dark of the wooded hills. Nobody else abroad, also seductive. He could take her anywhere. He could turn at Shear Shop Corner and take her up Battle Mountain and strangle her to death in her tuxedo, painting by Otto Dix. Maybe not in congenial Germany, but in cynical, exploitative America, she was running a risk out on the road in that tuxedo, or would have been had she been picked up by one of those Americans rather more American than I. The Man I Love, Wilson playing Gershwin like Gershwin was Shostakovich. Uncanny eeriness of Hamp on the Vives. January 1938. I am almost 9. Morty is soon to be 14. Winter. McCabe Avenue Beach. He is teaching me to throw the discus on the empty beach after school. Endless. "May I ask how you got hurt?" said Sabbath. "They're there for you if you're pretty and outgoing and smiling, but if you have any trouble, come back when you're better. I had very few true friends in New York. Most of them were just crap." "Where'd you meet these people?" "Clubs. At night I go to clubs to get away from the job, to get my mind on something. Being with the kid all day, I couldn't stand it, but it got me to New York. I would just go to clubs where people I know come." "Clubs? I'm out of my element. What are clubs?" "Well, I have one club I go to. I get in free. I get drinks, tickets. I don't have to worry about that. I just show up. I was going there for over a year. The same people come all the time. People you don't even know their names. But they have club names. You never know what they're doing in the daytime." "And they come to the club to do what?" "To have a good time." "Do they?" "Sure. Where I go, there are 5 different floors. The basement is reggae, and black people come there. The next floor is dance music, disco. Yuppies stay on the floor with the disco, people like that. And then there is techno, and then there is more techno, music made by a machine. It's a sound that just makes you dance. The lights can make you crazy. But that's because you get to feel the music very good. You dance. You dance for 3-4 hours. Whom do you dance with? People just stand and dance by themselves. It's a meditation kind of thing. The big main scene is a mix of everybody standing and dancing by themselves." "Well, you can't dance by yourself to Sugarfoot Stomp. Now hear that?" said Sabbath, good-natured and grinning. "To Sugarfoot Stomp, you've got to dance the Lindy, and you've got to dance the Lindy with somebody else. To this, you must jitterbug, my dear." "Yes," she said politely. "It's very beautiful. Respect for the aged. This callous girl has a sweet side, after all." "What about drugs at the clubs?" "Drugs? Yeah, it exists." He'd fucked up with Sugarfoot Stomp, alienated her completely, managed even to arouse her repugnance by overplaying how unmenacing, unfrightening, and old fuddy-duddy he was, and deprived her of the spotlight. But then this was a situation in which there was never really a right thing to do, except to remember to be tirelessly patient. If it takes a year, it takes a year. You've just got to bank on living 1 more year. This is the contact. Delight in that. Get her back to drugs. Get her onto herself and the significance of her life in the clubs. He turned off the tape. All she had to hear was Elman's klezmer trumpet oleaginizing by Mir Bistushane, and she'd leap from the moving car even out in the middle of nowhere. "What drugs? Which drugs?" "Marijuana," she said. "Cocaine. They have this drug, heroin and cocaine mixed together. They call it Special K. It's what drag queens take to go really nuts. It's a lot of fun. They dance. They're fascinating. It's a gay scene, definitely. A lot of Hispanic, Puerto Rican guys, lots of black men. A lot of them are young boys, 19, 20. They lip-sync to some old song, and they're all dressed up like Marilyn Monroe. You laugh a lot." How did you dress up? I wore a black dress, tight, long dress, low neck, a ring in my nose, long jumbo eyelashes, big platform shoes. Everybody's hugging each other and kissing each other, and all you do is party and dance all night long. Go there at midnight, stay till 3. That's the New York I knew, the America. That's all. I thought I should see more, so here I come. Because you were exploited. People exploited you. I don't want to talk about that. There was a whole thing that just broke down. Comes down to money. I thought I had a friend, but I had a friend who was using me. Really? How terrible. Using you? How? I was working with her, and she gave me half the money I was supposed to have. And I'd been working for her a lot. I thought this was a girlfriend of mine, and I said, "You cheated me out of my money. How could you do this to me?" "Oh, you found out," she says. "I'm not able to pay you back." So I'll never talk to her again. But what can you expect? The American way. Next time, I have to be ready. I'll say. How'd you meet this person? Through the club scene. Was it painful? I felt so stupid. What were you doing? What was the work? I was dancing in a club. My past. You're young to have a past. Oh, yeah, she said, laughing loudly at her unmaidenly precocity. I do have a past. A girl of 20 with a past. What's your name? Krista. Mine is Mickey, but up here the boys call me Country. Hey, Country. Most girls of 20 said, haven't begun to live. That's the American girls. I never made an American girlfriend. Guys, yeah. Is meeting women what the adventure is about? Yes, I would like to meet girlfriends, but mostly it's older women, you know, mother kind of types, which is okay with me. But girls my own age just doesn't work out. They're kids. So it's mother types for Krista. I guess, she said, laughing again. At Sheer Shop Corner, he took the turn up to Battle Mountain. The voice counseling patience was having trouble being heard. Mother kind of types. He could not let her get away. He would never in his life let a new discovery get away. The core of seduction is persistence. Persistence, the Jesuit ideal. 80% of women will yield under tremendous pressure if the pressure is persistent. You must devote yourself to fucking the way a monk devotes himself to God. Most men have to fit fucking in around the edges of what they define as more pressing concerns, the pursuit of money, power, politics, fashion. Christ knows what it might be, skiing. But Sabbath had simplified his life and fit the other concerns in around fucking. Nicky had run away from him. Rosanna was fed up with him. But, all in all, for a man of his stature, he had been improbably successful. Ascetic Mickey Sabbath, at it still into his 60s, the monk of fucking, the evangelist of fornication, ad majorem Dei gloriam. I was dancing in the club like. It's like, how can you say? I liked it. It was something I had to do for my own curiosity. I don't know. I just have to do everything in life. How long did you do that? Oh, I don't want to talk about it. I listened to advice from everybody, then I go out and do my own thing. He stopped talking, and on they drove. In that silence, in that darkness, every breath assumed its importance as that which kept you alive. His aims were clear, his dick was hard. He was on automatic pilot, excited, exultant, following behind his own headlights as though in a torch-led procession to the nocturnal moisture of the starry mountaintop, where celebrants were convening already for the wild worship of the stiff prick, dress optional. "Hey, are we lost?" she asked. No. By the time they had ascended halfway up the mountain, she could take her own silence no longer. Yep, played it perfectly. I entertained more at private parties, if you want to know. Bachelor parties. For about a year. With my girlfriend. But then you go shopping together and spend all the money anyway. These girls who do this are very lonesome. They have a bitchy mouth because they've been through a lot. And I just look at them and I say, oh my God, I'm too young. I got to get out of this. Because it was because of the money that I did it. And I got cheated. But that's New York. Anyway, I needed a change. I want to spend my time doing something else. A job dealing with people. And I missed nature. In Germany, I was a child in a village till my parents got divorced. I miss the nature and all that's peaceful. There are more things in life than money. So I came to live here.
And how is it here?
It's great. People turn out to be very friendly, very nice. I don't feel a stranger here, which is nice. In New York, everywhere I go, people try to pick me up. It happens all the time. And that's what New Yorkers love to do. I tell them, go away, and they go away. Pretty good at handling the situation. The thing is, don't show fear. I'm not afraid of you. People in New York can get a little strange, but not here. I feel at home here. I like America now. I even do patchwork, she said with a giggle. Me, I'm a real American. I make quilts.
How did you learn?
I read about it in books.
Well, I love quilts. I collect quilts, said Sabbath. I'd like to see yours someday. Would you sell me one?
Sell, she said, laughing heartily now, laughing huskily, like a boozer twice her age. Why not? Sure, I'll sell it, country. It's your money. And he erupted in laughter, too. My God, we are lost. And he made a sharp U-turn and got her back to her place over the gourmet shop in 15 minutes. All the way there they talked animatedly about their common interest. Unimaginable as it seemed, the gap was bridged. Antipathy evaporates, affinity is established, a date is made. Quilts, the American way. Thank you, Drinka had said to Krista when it was time for the old couple to get up and get dressed and go home. Thank you, she said, her voice faintly tremulous. Thank you. Thank you. She took Krista back into her arms and rocked her there like a baby. Thank you. Krista gently kissed each of Drenka's breasts. Her little mouth broke out in a warm, youthful smile when she cuddled closer to Drenka and, making big eyes girlishly, said, a lot of straight women like it. Though Sabbath had masterminded the evening and given Drenka the money she had demanded to participate, he'd found himself more or less superfluous from the moment Drenka knocked on the door and he led her into the attic room where he'd arrived early himself, thinking that it might be necessary, even after a month of delicate diplomacy, to continue negotiations right down to the wire. There was nothing small about this endeavor, and he was still not sure how reliable a person Krista was. She had not entirely cleansed herself in Madamascar Falls of her European suspicions, nor had Sabbath observed in her, as he hoped to, a single encouraging sign of the development of a more selfless point of view. Drenka, he said when he opened the door to let her in, this is my friend Krista. And though previously Drenka had seen Krista only through the window of the gourmet shop, strolled by a few times at Sabbath's suggestion, she walked directly across to where Krista was sitting on the second-hand couch in tight, torn jeans and a sequined velvet jacket, a shade of violet matching her eyes. Sinking to her knees on the bare floorboards, Drenka grabbed Krista's close-cropped head between her two hands and kissed her strongly on the mouth. The speed with which Drenka unbuttoned Krista's jacket, and with which Krista undid Drenka's silk blouse and cleared aside her push-up bra, astonished Sabbath. But Drenka's boldness always astonished him. He had imagined a warm-up would be required, talking and joking, overseen by him, a heart-to-heart talk, maybe even a sympathetic look through Krista's boring quilts to put the two of them at their ease, when, in fact, the $500 in Drenka's purse had emboldened her, in her words, to go in like a whore and do it." Afterward, Drenka couldn't say enough wonderful things about Krista. While Sabbath drove Drenka to where she'd parked behind Town Street, she snuggled adoringly to his side, kissing his beard, licking his neck. She, the woman of 48, as excited as a child just home from the circus. With a lesbian, there is a sense of love that I received from her. Such great experience she had in how to touch a woman's body. And the kissing, her knowledge of the female body, how to caress it, how to kiss it, how to touch my skin, make my nipples hard, and to suck my nipples. And that loving, giving, very sexual way, very like a man, that kind of erotic vibration she would deliver to me, it made me so very hot. To know exactly how to touch my body in a way almost more superior than sometimes men can know how to do it. To find on my cunt the little button, to hold it there exactly the amount of time that was needed to make me come. When she started kissing me, going down and sucking me, the skill of the tongue pressure right at the right place. Oh, that was very exciting. Up on the bed, only inches away, following every movement like a medical student observing his first surgical procedure, he'd had a good time, too, and once even been able to be of assistance when Krista, her muscular tongue anchored between Drenka's thighs, went groping around the sheet searching blindly for a vibrator. Earlier on, she had removed 3 of them from the bedside table, ivory-colored vibrators ranging in length from 3 to 6 inches. And Sabbath was able to locate one for her, the longest of them, and to place it correctly oriented into her outstretched hand. "So you didn't need me at all," he said. "Oh, no. I find it very wonderful and exciting to have another woman, but," said Drenka, lying as it would later turn out, "I wouldn't want to have to do it alone with her. It couldn't turn me on. I have to have the male penis there, the male excitement to urge me on. But I do find very erotic a young woman's body, the beauty of it, the round curves, the small breasts, the way she's shaped, the smell of it, the softness of it. And then as I come down myself to the cunt, I find the cunt actually quite beautiful. I never would have thought that looking in the mirror. You come with your shame to look at yourself, and you look at your sexual organs, and they are not acceptable from the aesthetic perspective. But in this setting, I can see the whole thing, and though it is a mystique that I am part of, it's a mystery to me, a total mystery."